Okay, guys, in this video, we're going to look at the quadratic formula. Okay. Mathematicians were, going through problems and equations and stuff like that, and they had problems that they could factor. They had problems that they could do complete square on. They had problems that they could do square root property on. But then they had these ones that were kind of ugly that didn't work with really anything. Okay. And so they had to come up with, or they wanted to come up with kind of a way to solve them that didn't involve, really tedious type stuff. Okay. So in their efforts to do this, they came up with this thing called the quadratic formula. Now, I do apologize. On the slide, they are dashes here. That is not a negative. So the quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, I do expect you to learn this formula. Okay, I do expect you to have this one memorized for this one. Now, you do have to have all of your parts on the same side. So you need to have your x squared, your x, and your plane number on the other side. It basically needs to be set equal to 0. And then this whole thing was designed to solve the ugly ones. However, through the process of making this, they were actually able to use it to solve any quadratic. So any of the previous ones that we've looked at could also have been done with the quadratic formulas. So the problem that we're going to look at is 2x squared plus 2x minus 1 equals 0. Okay, and I got that put over here on my other side. Okay, so now, first off, there's not really a good way to factor this because I'd have to play with a 2 here and a 1, and they're not going to combine to make this. Complete the square would be kind of ugly because I got to get rid of this 2 first and divide it all the way through. And I can't easily get x squared by itself because of that x term, okay? So what we're going to do is I'm going to write my formula. Okay, and I've already got everything on all the same sides. So here's my A, here's my B, there's my C, and your sign goes with you when you do this, okay? So I've got negative 2 plus and minus square root 2 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 1 all over 2 times 2. Okay, so now we're going to do a little bit of cleanup here. So I've just got the negative 2 still sitting up here on the front. I've got 2 squared is 4. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8 times negative 1 is positive 8 over 4. Okay, so I've got negative 2 plus and minus square root of 12 divided by 4. Now, I am going to try and clean up the 12 here. So that's going to give me negative 2 plus and minus square root of 4 times 3 over 4. I can take the square root of 4. So it's going to be negative 2 plus and minus square, or excuse me, 2 square root of 3 over 4. Okay. And now I can look at the numbers on the outside. That square root of 3 is just going to be there. But I can look at the numbers on the outside and clean those up a bit. Okay. And I'm going to put this over here. So I've got negative 1, they'll all divide by 2, plus and minus square roots of 3 over 2. Okay. And that's going to be my final answer. That is both of them. Okay. That is both of them that are going to come up because we do have, if you had to write them separately, you would have negative 1 plus square roots of 3 all over 2 and negative 1 minus square roots of 3 all over 2. Okay. So now one other thing that we need to talk about that goes along with our quadratic formula stuff is this thing called the discriminant. Okay. Now the discriminant is going to tell you how many answers you're going to have and what type they are. Okay. Now the discriminant is the b squared minus 4ac. It's the part that's underneath the square root when you're looking at that quadratic formula. Now, if that b squared minus 4ac comes out to be positive, so now you're taking the square root of a positive number, you're going to have 2 answers because you've got that plus and minus the square root. If the square root's pretty great and wonderful, if it's something like that last one we saw where I've still got a square root of 3, I've still got 2 answers. I've got the plus and the minus version coming away from that. Now, I'm going to skip down to the bottom one here. If that discriminant value comes up negative, now you've got square root of a negative. And what we saw in section 1.4 is that when you have square root of a negative, you have to bring that I out first, okay? And so then you would have I square root of, and then you can handle cleaning up the square root. Again, you're going to have 2 answers, but this time, because they have I's in them, they're going to be complex, okay? So we talked about if it's positive, I'm going to have two real solutions. If it's negative underneath there, it's going to be two complex solutions. Now, the only other one that we have is if it's 0, okay? And that's because square root of 0 is still 0. And if you take your favorite number and you add 0 to it, your number didn't change. And if you take your favorite number and you subtract 0 from it, your number didn't change. So the plus and the minus thing isn't going to change that value that's sitting in front of it, that negative b thing. So instead of having two answers, you're only going to have one. Now, sometimes they will call this a rational one because it's going to come out to be just a fraction thing, but it is still technically a real solution, okay? So let's take a look. It says compute the discriminant and then determine the number and types of solutions. So I'm going to get this one written down for us here. So I've got... Okay, so we've got this. So again, we've got, here's our A, our B, and our C processing through here. So we've got B squared minus 4AC. So I'm going to have negative 7 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 4. So it's going to be 49. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Times 4 is going to be positive 32. When we add that together, we're going to get 81. Okay. Which is type is real solutions, and I have 2 of them. Now, the other thing is sometimes they'll ask you to go ahead and find those solutions. Okay, guys, if that's the case, when you go into your quadratic formula, do note that if B is negative, you do need to put a set of parentheses around that. Guys, you've already done this. So just put in the value that you got. And then you're not having to do that extra math. Okay, from here, you could finish solving this down and get a solution.